Ethan Cole lived a life that had slowly shrunk into silence. The small, weathered house in suburban Ohio looked ordinary from the outside. The kind of home lined with neat hedges and a white picket fence that promised stability. But inside, it carried the weight of years of quiet suffering. Ethan had once been full of life, full of laughter, full of dreams shared with his wife, Claire. But when a car accident had claimed her life 3 years ago, everything he had known as home had cracked. The walls still held memories of her laughter, the lingering scent of her perfume, the faint mark where her favorite chair had always rested. Now it felt hollow. The only person anchoring him to life was his daughter, Lila. Lila was 9 years old, a bright spark with messy chestnut hair and eyes that mirrored her mother's warmth. She was a curious child, endlessly inquisitive, endlessly perceptive, even for her age. She noticed the small tremors in her father's hands when he brewed his morning coffee, the shadows beneath his eyes, the way he sometimes stared blankly at the television screen, as if trying to see something beyond it. She had grown up fast, in a household where loss was more than a word. It was a presence, almost tangible, pressing down on both of them. Yet, despite the sadness that hung over their lives, Lila had a spark that refused to be dimmed, a spark that, unbeknownst to Ethan, would one day light the path to his salvation. By day, Ethan worked as an automotive engineer at a struggling factory on the outskirts of town. The company, once a thriving center of innovation, was now teetering on the edge of bankruptcy. Investors had lost faith, production deadlines were missed, and morale among his colleagues had plummeted. Yet Ethan persevered. He spent long hours drafting engine designs at his desk, muttering to himself in ways that made coworkers think he had retreated fully into his own mind. The engineers around him respected his talent, but whispered behind his back that his ideas were too ambitious or impractical. He had grown used to the skepticism. It had become a rhythm, a quiet drumbeat he marched to every day. At home, life was no less challenging. Ethan cooked meals for himself and Lila, though his attempts often ended in overcooked pasta or burnt toast. He tried to shield her from the full brunt of their difficulties, never letting her see the letters from creditors or the tension that coiled in his chest every time he logged into the company's financial system. But Lila, with the perceptiveness only a child can possess, knew. She knew when her father's gaze lingered longer on the floor than the room, when his hands shook slightly as he held his coffee cup, when he exhaled a sigh that seemed to carry the weight of the world. Despite all this, Lila adored her father. She had always loved the quiet moments when he worked on his designs at the kitchen table. She would sit on the edge of the chair beside him, watching him sketch blueprints late into the night. His pencil moved with precision, drafting engines that could, in theory, revolutionize the way machines ran, but to Lila, it wasn't just machinery. It was magic. She would trace the lines of his sketches with her small fingers, asking questions in a soft voice. "Why is this part shaped like that, Dad?" She'd ask. He would sometimes pause, smile faintly, and explain as best as he could, though he always doubted whether she truly understood. In truth, she understood more than he realized. Every line she traced, every question she asked, every curious glance she threw at the components and tools in the garage, was slowly wiring her mind to the language of mechanics and invention. Ethan was unaware that through her innocence and curiosity, Lila was learning to think like him, learning to see the world in gears, pistons, and blueprints. She was observing, absorbing, dreaming alongside him. And one day, that observation would transform from quiet curiosity into the spark that saved not only the factory, but the father who had begun to lose faith in himself. Ethan's evenings were the hardest. After work, he would return to their small house, exhausted, and sit at the kitchen table with his sketchpad. He would draw, erase, redraw, mutter under his breath, and sometimes simply stare at the empty lines, as if they could somehow answer the questions he couldn't. Lila would curl up next to him, reading a book or playing with scraps of metal and wire she had scavenged from old appliances. She had an uncanny ability to tinker, to combine unlikely pieces into functional little devices, and Ethan often caught her creating something that would make him pause. For a fleeting moment, he would see a reflection of himself in her determination and ingenuity, and a pang of guilt would follow. Was he shielding her too much? Was he denying her the experiences that made him who he was? The factory's pressures were constant. Ethan's team had been tasked with creating a new energy-efficient engine, designed within a 3-month deadline, or the company would face collapse. Colleagues argued over minor details, deadlines slipped, and investors threatened to pull out their support. Every day felt like a battle against both time and human skepticism. And every evening, Ethan would retreat to his home, to the one place that was sanctuary, and cage both the kitchen table where he labored alone. Yet amidst all this, there was Lila, who had become a silent partner in his work. She would watch him, question him, and occasionally place a hand on his arm when he looked particularly defeated. "Don't worry, Dad," she'd say. "We'll figure it out together." Her voice was a gentle anchor in a stormy sea, one he didn't realize he needed until he heard it. On one particularly quiet night, the house lit only by the dim glow of a single lamp, Ethan leaned back in his chair and let out a long, weary sigh. Lila, sitting beside him with a small mechanical bird she had constructed from leftover parts, looked up and said softly, "You know, Dad, sometimes you're like a wizard. You make things come alive." Ethan smiled faintly, a genuine smile that hadn't graced his face in months. He ruffled her hair, a rare gesture of spontaneous joy. "Maybe," he murmured, "but even wizards need help sometimes." Little did he know, help was closer than he ever imagined. Lila, in her quiet, observant way, was already learning, already preparing herself for the moment. She would transform from a silent spectator into the secret weapon her father didn't know he needed. The bond between them, forged in grief, nurtured with love, and tempered by the challenges of life, was about to become the most powerful force either of them had ever known. Ethan returned to his sketches, pencil moving furiously across the page, while Lila tinkered quietly beside him. Outside, the wind rattled the windows of the old house, but inside, a different kind of energy buzzed a quiet, unacknowledged hope, the first flicker of light in years. In the small kitchen of a struggling engineer and his curious daughter, the seeds of something extraordinary had already been planted. And no one, not even Ethan, knew just how far that tiny spark of genius would carry them both. The factory was a pressure cooker, and Ethan Cole felt the heat from every side. Day after day, he arrived before sunrise, greeted by the familiar hum of machines, the clatter of tools, and the weary faces of engineers who had once been filled with hope. Each corner of the workshop seemed to echo with past successes, now overshadowed by looming deadlines and financial collapse. Investors were losing patience, murmuring that the company's dreams were too risky, while rival engineers whispered criticisms about Ethan's ambition, calling his ideas childish fantasies. Ethan had grown accustomed to skepticism, but it still wounded him. Every rejection reminded him that the world had no space for grief, no room for dreams built slowly on hope and memory. And yet he pressed on, not for accolades, but for the future, a future that included his daughter. Lila, she was the single reason he could bear the daily grind. The reason he could stare at blueprints late into the night despite exhaustion. She was his lifeline, the spark that refused to be extinguished in the darkness of his struggle. At home, the tension of the day followed him. Ethan would step through the doorway of their modest Ohio home, the faint smell of rain and machine oil clinging to his coat, only to be greeted by Lila's bright smile. "Hey, Dad," she'd chirp, running over with her backpack swinging. Her innocence and warmth were like sunlight cutting through his clouded mind. Yet, even her presence could not fully dispel the anxiety that wrapped around him like a vice. He tried to hide the worry lines that had grown sharper with each passing month, the way his hands shook slightly when opening bills, or the flicker of doubt in his eyes. But Lila noticed. Children had a way of seeing what adults desperately tried to conceal. She saw the weight on her father's shoulders, the quiet defeat in his eyes, and she felt an urgency to do something, anything, to lift the burden, even if she did not yet understand the full scope of it. Her solution was simple. She would help in the only ways she knew how. She began experimenting with his leftover parts and tools, rearranging screws, wires, and tiny motors into curious shapes. At first, Ethan dismissed it as child's play. He encouraged her curiosity, but part of him worried she was too young, too innocent to grasp the complexity of the world he was battling. One evening, after another grueling day at the factory, Ethan slumped at the kitchen table. He had just received yet another rejection email from a potential investor. His vision for a revolutionary energy-efficient engine was deemed impractical once again. He rubbed his tired eyes and let out a long, hollow sigh, feeling the familiar sting of failure pressing down on him. Lila, sensing his despair, placed her small hand on his arm. "You'll fix it, Dad. You always do," she whispered, her voice unwavering, filled with the certainty only a child could possess. Ethan looked at her, her wide eyes full of trust, and something inside him stirred. It was a small flame at first, flickering uncertainly in the cavern of his exhaustion. But it was enough. Enough to remind him that giving up was not an option, not when Lila's faith in him was so pure, so absolute. The next day at work, Ethan returned with a renewed sense of purpose. He approached his sketches with vigor, analyzing every curve, every ratio, every line, as if the solution had been hiding in plain sight all along. He began to see patterns that had eluded him before, ideas that only formed when viewed through the lens of someone who believed in him unconditionally. Lila's words had reminded him that hope was not abstract. It was a choice. At home, Lila's own curiosity intensified. She watched her father work, memorizing the movements of his hands, the logic behind his calculations. She started to ask questions that made Ethan pause, questions that challenged him to explain concepts in new ways. "Why does the piston move like that?" she asked one night, her finger tracing the curve of a drawn cylinder. Ethan hesitated, then explained patiently, using simple analogies that made sense to her young mind. She listened intently, her eyes sparkling with comprehension and excitement. Ethan began to notice something remarkable. Lila was not just absorbing his explanations, she was thinking critically, experimenting in her own ways, discovering solutions he had overlooked. One night, he found her in the garage with a small motor she had taken apart and reassembled, tweaking a component that had puzzled him for weeks. "I think it works better this way," she said innocently, her face glowing with pride. Ethan examined her adjustment and felt a shiver of realization. She had solved the problem he had struggled with for days. This moment marked a turning point. Ethan began to see his daughter not merely as a source of comfort, but as a collaborator, a partner in his struggle against failure. He started involving her more in his work, teaching her the basics of engines, electrical circuits, and design principles. The garage, once a space of solitude, became a shared laboratory, a place where ideas bounced off the walls, fueled by their combined ingenuity and the unspoken bond of love and grief. As the weeks passed, the rhythm of their collaboration deepened. Lila's confidence grew alongside her skills. She no longer hesitated to offer suggestions, her intuitive grasp of mechanics surprising even Ethan. He found himself marveling at her ingenuity, amazed that such brilliance could come from someone so young. She became a living embodiment of hope and potential, A reminder that the future was not yet written, and that perhaps, together, they could achieve what he alone could not. Yet the pressure outside their home never ceased. At the factory, deadlines loomed and competition was fierce. Colleagues who had once been friendly now whispered doubts and criticisms, attempting to undermine his credibility. Investors were increasingly impatient, demanding results with a sense of urgency that left Ethan both exhausted and anxious. He knew that failure could mean the loss of everything: his job, the company, and the fragile sense of stability he had been struggling to maintain for both himself and his daughter. But every evening, when he returned home, he was reminded of what truly mattered. Leela's unwavering faith, her curiosity, her tireless spirit, and her innocence became his anchor. Each time she smiled up at him with those bright, inquisitive eyes, Ethan felt a surge of determination. No matter how impossible the task seemed, he would continue, not just for himself, but for her. And in her presence, he began to rediscover a part of himself he thought had been lost forever. The part that dared to dream, to hope, to fight. In the quiet of their small Ohio home, amid scattered tools and scattered sketches, a partnership was quietly forming. It was unconventional, unplanned, and yet profoundly powerful. A father and daughter, bound by loss, love, and an unspoken understanding, were preparing to face challenges that neither could overcome alone. What Ethan did not yet realize was that the daughter sitting beside him, her tiny hands covered in grease, her eyes filled with curiosity, would soon become his greatest ally, his secret weapon. The key to unlocking a future he had once feared was beyond his reach. As Ethan finally leaned back in his chair that night, exhausted yet quietly determined, he glanced at Lila tinkering with a small gadget on the table. The faint glow of the lamp illuminated her focused face. And in that glow, he saw more than just a child. He saw the spark of something extraordinary, something that would change their lives forever. The storm of their daily struggles had not yet passed, but for the first time in years, hope felt tangible, real, and within reach. And so, in the quiet of their small kitchen, with sketches strewn across the table and the soft hum of imagination filling the air, father and daughter embarked on a journey that neither fully understood, but both instinctively knew would be extraordinary. It was a journey of love, of resilience, and of the incredible power that can emerge when hope and genius are nurtured in the hands of the next generation. The nights in the Cole household had begun to take on a rhythm of their own. The outside world might have believed Ethan to be a man consumed entirely by the pressures of a failing factory and relentless deadlines. But inside their small Ohio home, another world was quietly unfolding. Leela had grown more confident in her tinkering, her small hands adeptly manipulating tools and motors, her eyes scanning the sketches her father left on the kitchen table with the careful attention of a seasoned engineer. One stormy night, as rain lashed against the windows and the wind rattled the frame of their old house, Ethan sat slumped over his latest set of blueprints. His eyes were red from exhaustion, and the pencil he held was worn down from hours of attempts to perfect a problem that had eluded him for weeks. He had been working on an innovative combustion design for the company's new energy-efficient engine, an engine that could, if successful, save the struggling factory from collapse. But the calculations weren't adding up. The ratios were off, the flow dynamics unstable, and every prototype test he ran had failed. He rubbed his temples and let out a long, frustrated sigh. Lila, who had been quietly assembling a small mechanical bird from spare parts, glanced up at her father. She watched him with a mix of curiosity and concern. Something about his posture, the slump of his shoulders, the way he had let his pencil hover over the blueprint without moving, told her that he was on the brink of defeat. She felt a surge of determination. She would not let him give up, not when she knew somehow that the solution was within reach. With delicate care, She slid a chair over beside him and began to examine the sketch. Her small fingers traced the lines of the engine diagrams, and her eyes narrowed in concentration. After a long pause, she whispered, "Dad, what if it went this way instead?" She lightly moved one section of the blueprint, redrawing a pathway for the fuel intake that Ethan had tried and discarded countless times. Her suggestion was innocent, tentative, yet it carried a boldness that only a child could muster, an intuition unshaped by doubt or fear. Ethan blinked, leaning back in disbelief. "Wait, did you just?" He started, his voice trailing off. He studied her modification carefully. Then slowly, as realization dawned, he saw it. The adjustment she had made corrected a flaw that had kept him stuck for days. It was elegant, simple, and brilliant. The kind of solution that, once discovered, seemed obvious, but only after someone with fresh eyes and a pure mind saw it first. He stared at her, momentarily lost for words. "Leela, this is amazing." She grinned shyly, barely understanding the significance of what she had just done. "I just thought maybe it would work," she said. Her innocence contrasted sharply with the weight of the discovery she had unwittingly made. For Ethan, this was a turning point, not just for the engine, but for the relationship between him and his daughter. She had moved from observer to participant, from silent supporter to collaborator. From that night on, the kitchen and garage transformed into something magical. No longer merely a place where Ethan fought against failure alone, it became a shared laboratory. They worked side by side, father and daughter, experimenting with designs, testing small models, and learning from each misstep. Ethan taught her the principles of engines, the subtleties of airflow, the delicate balance between power and efficiency. Lila listened intently, absorbing every word, asking questions that made him rethink even his most basic assumptions. And in the quiet moments, when she smiled after solving a tiny problem, Ethan felt a warmth he had not known since his wife's passing, a sense of joy and pride that went far beyond professional achievement. Their collaboration extended beyond mechanics. Lila's natural curiosity and creativity introduced ideas Ethan had never considered. She suggested alternative materials for parts, experimented with novel geometries, and even questioned some of the traditional engineering rules he had long followed. Her imagination, unburdened by convention, brought new life to his designs. The air in the garage was thick with excitement, punctuated by the hum of motors and the occasional burst of laughter. For the first time in years, Ethan felt alive, not merely surviving, but thriving, driven by a combination of necessity, hope, and the sheer brilliance of his daughter's mind. Yet the outside world remained a constant pressure. The company's deadlines loomed, investors were growing impatient, and rival engineers were increasingly vocal in their criticisms. Ethan knew that their work, as innovative as it was, would face intense scrutiny. Failure was not an option. But he also knew something else. With Lila by his side, he had a secret weapon. Her insights, her intuition, and her courage had already solved problems that had held him back for weeks. She was more than a daughter. She had become an indispensable part of the solution. One evening, after several hours of intense tinkering, they finally managed to assemble a small-scale prototype that incorporated both Ethan's rigorous engineering and Lila's creative adjustments. The motor hummed smoothly, a sound that resonated like music in their small home. Lila's eyes widened in delight. "It works," she exclaimed, and Ethan laughed aloud, feeling a weight lift from his shoulders that he hadn't realized he was carrying. The success was small, but monumental. It was proof that together they could accomplish what neither could do alone. As the night deepened, they sat side by side, the prototype humming softly on the table. Ethan looked at Lila, seeing not just his daughter, but a partner, a genius in her own right. and a source of inspiration he had never imagined. He realized that the breakthrough was not merely in the mechanics of the engine. It was in the trust, collaboration, and love that had transformed their relationship. Each idea, each adjustment, each careful calculation now carried an emotional weight that neither blueprints nor machines could quantify. In that quiet moment, amidst scattered tools, sketches, and the faint smell of motor oil, Ethan understood something profound. The solution he had been seeking for so long had not come from hours of solitary struggle. From late nights consumed by doubt, it had come from someone who saw the world differently. Someone who believed in him, even when he doubted himself. Lila, his daughter, had become his spark of genius, the unseen force that would guide him through the challenges ahead. He ruffled her hair gently, a rare gesture of unguarded affection, and whispered, "You're incredible, Lila. I don't know what I'd do without you." She smiled, her small teeth glinting in the lamp's glow, completely unaware of the monumental role she had just played. But Ethan knew, and he felt a surge of determination that made him sit taller at his desk, pencil poised over the blueprint once again. Outside, the storm had passed, leaving the night air crisp and still. Inside, in a small Ohio kitchen that had become a laboratory of hope and ingenuity, a father and daughter had discovered something extraordinary. They had discovered the power of collaboration, the spark of innovation born from curiosity and love, and the promise that together they could overcome obstacles that once seemed insurmountable. The journey ahead would be long, filled with challenges and setbacks, but for the first time in years, Ethan believed not only in the success of his work, but in the incredible potential of his daughter. That night, as Ethan finally set down his pencil and leaned back in exhaustion, he watched Lila fall asleep on the chair beside him, her small hands clutching a piece of the motor they had been testing. A quiet smile touched his lips. He understood now that their greatest challenge had not been the failing factory, the deadlines, or the skeptical investors. It had been learning to trust each other. And in that trust, in that bond, lay the true genius of their partnership. The spark of genius had been lit, small but unstoppable, and it began with a 9-year-old girl who had simply wanted to help her father, and in doing so, changed both their lives forever. The day had arrived. Ethan Cole knew that the company's final evaluation would determine everything: the future of the struggling factory, his career, and the fragile sense of hope he had been nurturing for years. The boardroom was tense, the air heavy with anticipation, and the skeptical faces of executives and rival engineers seemed to weigh down on him before he even stepped inside. Investors, eager for innovation but weary of risk, sat along the long mahogany table, scanning every document with hawkish attention. This was the moment when failure could not be afforded. Ethan carefully unrolled his blueprint onto the conference table, his hand steady despite the pounding of his heart. The design he laid out was his finest work yet, a revolutionary energy-efficient engine that he believed could redefine the company's future. Every calculation, every diagram, every intricate detail represented months of late nights, frustration, and painstaking adjustments. He glanced at the board members, noting the barely concealed doubt in their eyes. Some had already written him off as too ambitious, too stubborn, too idealistic to succeed in the harsh world of corporate engineering. He began his presentation, explaining the principles, the projected efficiency, and the potential impact on the company's bottom line. At first, there were polite nods, but as he moved into technical details, he saw the subtle shake of heads and the whispered conversations between rival engineers. Too risky, untested, unrealistic, they muttered under their breath. Ethan felt a pang of defeat that he fought to mask. He had given everything, but their skepticism threatened to undo him before he could demonstrate the engine's full potential. After the presentation, the board deliberated. Hours passed like minutes for Ethan, as he paced the small corridor outside the conference room, waiting for a verdict that could make or break him. Finally, the lead executive emerged, his expression unreadable. "Mr. Cole," he began, "while your design is intriguing, it is far too ambitious for our current resources. We cannot proceed with this prototype." The words hit Ethan like a physical blow. He had expected challenges, but this rejection felt final. He clenched his fists and felt a hollow ache in his chest. All those nights, all the effort, all the hope he had pinned on this design, was it truly wasted? He walked home, the rain soaking his coat and mingling with the sweat of anxiety. At home, he placed the rejected blueprints on the kitchen table, staring at them with a mix of anger and despair. The faint light of the lamp illuminated every meticulous detail, mocking him with its perfection that no one else seemed to recognize. Lila, who had been quietly observing him since he returned, sensed the depth of his despair. She approached the table and picked up one of the blueprints, her small hands tracing the lines. "Dad, why don't we try it a little differently?" she asked softly. Ethan looked at her, weary and defeated. "Lila, I've tried everything." "They said it won't work," he murmured, the weight of failure in his voice. But she was undeterred. Her youthful intuition, unclouded by years of doubt, gave her courage. "Maybe they're wrong. Maybe we just need to fix one part," she insisted. That night, Lila quietly stayed up, working independently. She spread out scraps of paper, small mechanical parts, and tiny motors she had salvaged from old appliances. Ethan slept on the couch, exhausted and unaware of the silent genius at work beside him. Lila carefully examined the engine's flow dynamics, referencing everything she had learned from her father over the past months. Slowly, methodically, she began making adjustments. She altered a fuel intake path, slightly modified a cylinder alignment, and added a subtle change to the cooling system's small shifts that no one would notice unless they were looking for them. When Ethan awoke the next morning, he saw her sitting at the table, tired but beaming, surrounded by a chaotic arrangement of sketches and miniature engine parts. "Lila, what have you done?" he asked, a mixture of astonishment and apprehension in his voice. She explained, in her childlike way, the changes she had made, showing him each adjustment. Ethan examined the modifications with increasing disbelief. She had not only solved the persistent issue that had blocked the engine's efficiency, but her changes had improved it beyond anything he had imagined possible. A surge of awe and pride coursed through him. His 9-year-old daughter, who had only been learning, experimenting, and observing, had just accomplished what entire teams of engineers had failed to do. She had taken the foundation he had built and enhanced it with a clarity and intuition that was rare, even among seasoned professionals. Ethan realized, with a mix of disbelief and gratitude, that Lila had become more than his child. She had become his collaborator, his silent partner, his secret weapon. Together, they began rebuilding the prototype in the garage, their movements synchronized, their thoughts aligned. Ethan instructed, Lila experimented, and together they tested, tweaked, and perfected every detail. Hours turned into nights, and nights into early mornings. Each success, no matter how small, was celebrated with quiet laughter and high fives. The bond between father and daughter deepened, their shared determination creating a force stronger than any boardroom skepticism or corporate doubt. The prototype began to take shape, its humming engine a testament to their collaboration. Ethan marveled at how seamlessly Lila's insights had integrated with his own engineering principles. He began to see her not merely as an assistant, but as an equal, whose perspective brought clarity and creativity he could not have achieved alone. Every adjustment, every correction, every small tweak reflected her ingenuity, her intuition, and her unwavering belief in them both. As the final days before the next company competition approached, Ethan and Lila worked tirelessly. The world outside remained unaware of their secret, the hidden blueprint, the child's unseen genius that had transformed an ordinary engine into something extraordinary. They did not need recognition, not yet. The satisfaction of creation, the thrill of innovation, and the deepening love between them was reward enough. Late one evening, Ethan paused to look at Lila. She was covered in smudges of grease, her hair sticking to her forehead, eyes shining with concentration. He felt a surge of admiration and gratitude. "Lila, I can't believe this. You've done something incredible," he whispered. She looked up, her small face glowing with pride and innocence. "I just wanted to help," she replied simply. In that moment, Ethan realized that the solution had never been just about the engine. It had been about trust, collaboration, and the belief that genius can emerge in the most unexpected forms. The factory, the boardroom, and the skeptical investors still loomed ahead. But Ethan now carried a quiet confidence he hadn't felt in years. They had a plan, a working prototype, and most importantly, each other. The hidden blueprint, the one no one else had seen, was ready. And when the time came, it would reveal the truth that had been hiding in plain sight all along, that his secret weapon was not a machine, nor a formula, nor a strategy, but his daughter, Lila, whose ingenuity and love had turned failure into possibility. As they sat together in the dim glow of the kitchen, reviewing the prototype one last time, Ethan whispered, almost to himself, "We can do this, Lila. Together, we can do this." She smiled, nodding with quiet determination. The storm outside had passed, leaving a calm night. But within the small Ohio home, a revolution was quietly brewing, an invention born not from ambition alone, but from the unbreakable bond between a father and his daughter. And so, with the hidden blueprint now complete, they prepared to face the world, unaware that what they had created would not only challenge the limits of engineering, but also touch the hearts of everyone who witnessed their story. The journey ahead was still uncertain, filled with skepticism, doubt, and competition. But Ethan had finally realized the truth. Sometimes, the greatest breakthroughs come not from experience or expertise alone, but from the heart, the mind, and the courage of someone you love. The garage had become a kingdom of creation, a place where failures were celebrated as lessons and small victories gleamed brighter than any corporate award. Ethan Cole moved with focused intensity, his hands steady as he connected pistons, adjusted valves, and calibrated sensors. Every motion was precise, the result of years of experience, but now there was another force guiding him. Lila, his daughter, small but fierce in her determination, worked beside him with the confidence of someone who understood that every detail mattered. She had been up since dawn, her small fingers deftly twisting screws and soldering tiny components with the care of a master craftsman. Ethan watched her in awe, amazed at the precision and clarity with which she approached each challenge. She didn't just follow instructions. She questioned them, improved them, and at times introduced innovations he had never imagined. In moments like these, he realized that Lila had become more than a daughter. She was his collaborator, his inspiration, and in ways he was only beginning to understand, his secret weapon. They had rebuilt the prototype from scratch, incorporating every adjustment and improvement Lila had suggested. The engine now sat gleaming on the test bench, a marvel of ingenuity that blended Ethan's engineering expertise with Lila's intuitive brilliance. Every component had been carefully examined, tested, and refined. Ethan felt a surge of pride that was almost overwhelming. This was no longer just a machine. It was a testament to their bond, a physical manifestation of hope, resilience, and trust. The air in the garage was thick with tension and anticipation. Ethan ran his hands over the engine one final time, checking the alignment of the pistons, and the calibration of the sensors. Lila stood beside him, her eyes wide with excitement and a touch of nervousness. She had contributed more than anyone could imagine, yet she remained humble, unaware of the magnitude of her accomplishment. Ethan placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "Tonight, we see if all our hard work pays off," he said quietly. She nodded, gripping his hand for reassurance, and together they prepared for the first full test of the rebuilt engine. The moment the engine roared to life, the room filled with the low, steady hum of power. Lila's eyes sparkled, and Ethan felt a thrill he hadn't experienced in years. The prototype exceeded expectations, performing smoothly and efficiently in every test. He watched as his daughter's small hands adjusted minor settings, tweaking the engine's output with a confidence that amazed him. "You're incredible, Lila," he whispered, pride swelling in his chest. She smiled shyly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "We did it together," she said softly. Word of the upcoming company innovation contest had already spread, and Ethan knew they needed to act carefully. Their design was still unproven in front of the skeptical board, and rival engineers were likely preparing their own entries with the sole intention of discrediting him. But for the first time, Ethan felt genuinely confident. He had a plan, a working prototype, and a secret weapon that no one else could anticipate his daughter. She had not only contributed to the engine's design, but had elevated it to a level that could not be ignored. As the contest day approached, they worked tirelessly. Nights blurred into early mornings, fueled by coffee, determination, and the thrill of discovery. Lila's contributions grew bolder with each passing day. She suggested adjustments to the engine's cooling system that improved efficiency by several percent. She noticed vibrations that Ethan had dismissed as minor, and her solution eliminated the problem entirely. Every time she spoke, Ethan felt a mix of pride and amazement. She was transforming the prototype from a machine into a masterpiece, and he knew that without her, their chances of success would be slim. Despite the intensity of their work, they found moments of laughter and joy. Lila would sometimes make small, playful jokes about the engine, or exaggerate her importance in the project with mock seriousness. Ethan couldn't help but smile. These moments reminded him that beyond the deadlines and technical challenges, their collaboration was also about love, trust, and shared experience. The garage, once a place of solitude, had become a sanctuary where father and daughter could dream, create, and inspire each other. Finally, the prototype was ready. Ethan and Lila stood side by side, hands on the machine, hearts pounding with anticipation. The hum of the engine filled the garage, steady and powerful, a symbol of months of effort, frustration, and discovery. Ethan looked at Lila, his voice barely above a whisper. "You've been incredible through all of this. You're more than just my daughter. You're my partner, my inspiration, and my secret weapon. Tonight, we show the world what we've built." She nodded, determination etched into her small features. "Let's do it, Dad," she said confidently. The contest day arrived, and Ethan entered the room with the prototype, aware of the skeptical eyes fixed on him. Rival engineers whispered criticisms, investors eyed the engine with doubt, and the board prepared to judge their submission harshly. Ethan's hands trembled slightly as he approached the testing area, but the confidence he drew from Lila steadied him. She stood beside him, her eyes bright and unwavering, reminding him that they were in this together. When the engine was switched on, it roared to life with a smooth, precise efficiency that stunned the room. Gasps echoed across the boardroom, followed by murmurs of astonishment. The prototype performed flawlessly, exceeding expectations in every test. The rival engineers could only watch in disbelief, their whispers turning to silence. Investors leaned forward, intrigued, impressed, and cautious. Ethan smiled subtly at Lila, who returned a shy, proud grin. She had done it. Together, they had done it. Ethan knew the moment of revelation had arrived. He could take full credit for the engine, hide the role Lila had played, and claim victory. But as he looked at her small, expectant face, he realized that honesty, trust, and recognition were more important than personal gain. Standing tall, he addressed the board and the audience. "This design is the result of hard work, persistence, and collaboration," he said, glancing at Lila. "But most importantly, it was inspired by someone I love more than anything, my daughter. She's been my secret weapon all along." The room fell silent. Then, slowly, applause began to ripple across the floor, growing louder until it became a wave of admiration and astonishment. Cameras flashed, and murmurs of approval spread throughout the room. Lila beamed, unaware of the impact her contribution had just made. Ethan felt a swell of pride that eclipsed any professional success. This victory was not only for the prototype, but for the bond they had nurtured, the trust they had built, and the courage they had shared. After the contest, journalists and investors approached them, eager to hear the story behind the engine. Lila shyly explained her role, detailing the adjustments she had made and how she had worked alongside her father. Ethan listened, heart swelling with pride, knowing that their secret weapon had been revealed, not as a mysterious advantage, but as a living, breathing testament to curiosity, determination, and love. That night, back in their small Ohio home, Ethan watched Lila sleep beside him on the couch, exhausted but radiant. The prototype sat in the garage, humming quietly, a symbol of their triumph. He whispered softly, "You were amazing today, Lila. Truly amazing." She stirred, smiling in her sleep, unaware of the weight of her achievement. Ethan knew that this was just the beginning. With her by his side, there was nothing they could not accomplish. She had turned his world upside down, transformed his despair into hope, and become his most powerful ally. The unseen hero had revealed herself, not with words of grandeur or adult sophistication, but with the quiet brilliance and intuition of a child. Ethan realized that the engine's success was secondary. The true victory lay in the recognition of the extraordinary talent and heart of his daughter. Together, they had proven that genius does not always come from experience alone. It can emerge from love, curiosity, and the courage to believe in each other when the world doubts you most. As the hum of the engine echoed in the garage and the stars shone outside the window, Ethan and Lila shared a quiet, unspoken understanding. They had faced the storm, embraced the challenge, and emerged victorious, not merely through technical skill, but through the power of connection, trust, and the unbreakable bond between a father and his daughter. And in that bond lay the promise of even greater achievements to come. The day of the public demonstration had arrived. For months, Ethan Cole had lived in a haze of deadlines, blueprints, and quiet collaboration with his daughter Lila. Now, the prototype they had nurtured and perfected would face its ultimate test, a full demonstration. In front of the company board, investors, engineers, and journalists. The tension in the conference hall was palpable, a sharp contrast to the calm determination that had blossomed in the quiet of their small Ohio home. Ethan stood beside the prototype, his heart beating in a rhythm that matched the low hum of the machine. Lila, dressed in her favorite green sweater and jeans, fidgeted slightly beside him. Her small hands clasped together as she tried to hide her nervous excitement. Though she had contributed more than anyone else could imagine, this was the first time she would see the full world witness the result of her ingenuity. Ethan glanced down at her, drawing strength from the confidence in her eyes. For months, she had been his secret weapon, and now it was time to reveal her brilliance to the world. The boardroom was packed. Rival engineers, some who had mocked Ethan's ambitious design in the past, sat with skeptical expressions. Investors leaned forward in anticipation, their fingers tapping on polished mahogany tables. Journalists scribbled notes feverishly, cameras trained on the prototype, capturing every angle of the gleaming engine. The room was electric with anticipation, the kind that could make even the most seasoned engineers feel a mix of excitement and dread. Ethan took a deep breath. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice steady despite the tension. "What you see before you is the culmination of months of research, innovation, and collaboration. This engine is designed to redefine energy efficiency and mechanical performance. But it is also the product of something far more important: trust, mentorship, and the extraordinary collaboration of a young mind who saw possibilities that even seasoned engineers might overlook." He paused, glancing at Lila. "This engine could not have been completed without my daughter, Leela. Her insights, creativity, and intuition have been indispensable. She is, in every sense, my secret weapon." A murmur ran through the audience. Some gasped in surprise, while others exchanged incredulous glances. Ethan watched Lila's face light up, her small hand gripping the edge of the table as she beamed with pride. She had never sought recognition, but the acknowledgement from her father, publicly, made her chest swell with confidence and joy. The demonstration began. Ethan guided the engine through its first run, explaining the unique design elements, the innovative energy-efficient mechanisms, and the technical challenges they had overcome. Layla's contributions were subtly highlighted, showing how her adjustments improved airflow, enhanced cooling, and increased overall efficiency. The engine performed flawlessly, a smooth hum filling the room as it exceeded every expectation. The audience leaned forward, captivated, some even standing to get a better view. Investors whispered among themselves, impressed by the precision, efficiency, and ingenuity on display. Rival engineers, some who had been vocal critics, could only watch in silence, their skepticism replaced by grudging admiration. Ethan explained each component with care, emphasizing the collaborative effort behind every adjustment. Lila's small hands occasionally pointed to key areas, explaining her adjustments with a confidence that surprised even him. It was clear to everyone, this was not merely an engineering feat, it was the embodiment of a partnership between generations, driven by curiosity, intelligence, and trust. As the demonstration reached its climax, Ethan pressed a lever to show the engine operating under maximum load. The machine responded flawlessly, performing better than any prototype the company had seen in years. The room erupted in applause, and Ethan felt a surge of pride so overwhelming it brought tears to his eyes. He glanced at Lila, who was practically glowing with pride, her small body vibrating with excitement. "We did it," he whispered softly, almost to himself. Journalists crowded forward, eager to capture the story behind the innovation. Cameras flashed, microphones were thrust forward, and questions flew from every direction. Ethan and Lila answered together, explaining how the engine was developed, the challenges they overcame, and the collaborative process that had brought them to this moment. Lila, initially shy, grew more confident with each question, her explanations precise and insightful. Observers were astonished that a child had played such a pivotal role in a breakthrough of this magnitude. After the demonstration, the board convened for deliberation. Ethan waited nervously, standing beside Lila, their hands brushing in a quiet, supportive gesture. When the lead executive finally returned, his expression had softened. "Mr. Cole, this is extraordinary," he said. "Your design exceeds every expectation. And to see the collaboration with your daughter, well, it is unprecedented. This engine will not only be approved for production, but it will also become the flagship of our innovation division." Relief, pride, and exhilaration washed over Ethan. He knelt to hug Lila, holding her tightly. "You were amazing today," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "I couldn't have done this without you." Lila buried her face in his chest, giggling softly. "We did it together, Dad," she said. In that embrace, they both understood that the real victory lay not only in the engine, but in the bond that had carried them through months of struggle, doubt, and relentless effort. As the room cleared, Ethan took Lila's hand and led her to the balcony overlooking the city. The sun had begun to set, casting a golden glow over the skyline. "Look at this," he said softly. "All of this? It's ours to change, to improve, to explore. And it started because you believed, and because you were brave enough to try." Lila looked out at the horizon, her mind buzzing with possibilities. "There's so much more we can do, Dad," she said. "I want to keep building, keep discovering, keep helping." Ethan smiled, realizing that this was just the beginning. The engine was only the first of many projects, the first of many challenges they would tackle together. Lila's genius was not limited to this one moment. Her creativity, curiosity, and courage had only just begun to shape their world. And Ethan, once consumed by grief and doubt, now saw a future filled with possibilities, guided by the smallest hands and the brightest mind he had ever known. That night, back at home, Ethan and Lila celebrated quietly. The kitchen table was cluttered with sketches, tools, and remnants of their work, but the atmosphere was electric with triumph. Lila chattered excitedly about ideas for improvements, future designs, and new innovations, while Ethan listened, awed by her vision and clarity. He realized that he had been given a gift beyond measure, not just a brilliant collaborator, but a daughter whose courage and intellect could change the world. Ethan sat back and watched her work, a sense of gratitude and pride filling him completely. The secret weapon he had once feared would never be noticed by the world had been revealed, not as a mystery, but as a living, breathing genius whose heart and mind had transformed not only the engine, but the very trajectory of their lives. Together, they had proven that the greatest innovations often emerge not from lone brilliance, but from collaboration, trust, and the unshakable belief in one another. Outside, the city lights sparkled against the night sky, a reflection of endless possibilities. Inside, the small Ohio home hummed with quiet energy, the prototype engine resting in the garage, a symbol of triumph, creativity, and the extraordinary partnership between father and daughter. For Ethan and Lila, the journey had just begun, and the world was about to witness the unstoppable force of their collaboration. The morning after the public demonstration, the Cole household was buzzing with energy long before dawn. Ethan had barely slept, replaying every moment of the previous day in his mind, the roar of the engine, the stunned silence in the boardroom, the moment when he acknowledged Lila as his secret weapon. But the excitement that kept him awake was nothing compared to the electric buzz surrounding Lila herself. Overnight, her small act of ingenuity had captured the attention of the entire company, and even the local press had begun reporting on the 9-year-old engineering prodigy. Lila was radiant. She skipped into the kitchen, her small backpack bouncing against her shoulders, and greeted Ethan with a wide smile. "Dad, did you see? People are talking about me. They're saying I'm like a real engineer," she exclaimed, her eyes sparkling with the kind of joy that could light up an entire room. Ethan laughed, ruffling her hair gently. "You're not just like a real engineer, Lila. You are one. Today, the world knows what I've known all along." The day quickly became a whirlwind of interviews, phone calls, and meetings. Reporters arrived at their doorstep, eager to hear the story behind the engine and the remarkable collaboration that had brought it to life. Investors and board members called to congratulate Ethan and arrange further discussions. Emails flooded in, praising the ingenuity of the design and the brilliance of its youngest contributor. Lila, initially shy, gradually warmed to the attention, answering questions with a mix of innocence and sharp insight that left even seasoned journalists impressed. At the company headquarters, Ethan and Lila were invited to a special recognition ceremony. Employees gathered to witness the moment when the father-daughter duo would be formally acknowledged for their groundbreaking work. The room was filled with applause, admiration, and a sense of awe. For Ethan, it was a surreal experience, seeing his daughter, the same child who had quietly tinkered in their garage, receive accolades for a feat that had changed the trajectory of their lives. As they walked to the podium, Ethan glanced at Lila. "Are you ready?" he asked softly. She nodded, her small hand slipping into his. Together, they faced the audience, the hum of cameras and murmurs of admiration filling the air. Ethan began to speak, explaining the development of the engine, the technical challenges they had overcome, and the collaborative process that had made success possible. Then he paused, letting the attention shift entirely to Lila. "This project," he said, his voice steady and proud, "would not have been possible without the insight, creativity, and determination of my daughter, Lila. She is not just my inspiration, she is my partner, my collaborator, and as I've long known, my secret weapon. She has solved problems that even experienced engineers struggled with, and her contributions have elevated this engine beyond what I could have achieved alone." The room erupted in applause. Lila blushed, a shy smile spreading across her face, but her eyes shone with pride. She had worked tirelessly in the shadows, her contributions often unnoticed. But now the world was seeing her as she truly was a genius in her own right. Fearless and brilliant, with the courage to trust her instincts and the heart to persevere. In the following weeks, the attention only grew. Local and national news outlets covered the story, celebrating Lila as a prodigy and Ethan as the father who nurtured and recognized her talent. Invitations arrived for interviews on television shows, educational programs, and technology panels. The story of a 9-year-old girl transforming a struggling company's fortunes captured hearts and imaginations nationwide. Lila's fame was growing, but Ethan remained her anchor, grounding her in humility and encouraging her to focus on learning rather than accolades. Yet with the spotlight came new challenges. Rival engineers, previously dismissive of Ethan's work, began to scrutinize the engine more closely, seeking flaws or attempting to discredit Lila's contributions as trivial. Investors pressed for rapid production, pushing deadlines and intensifying the pressure on both father and daughter. Ethan knew that the attention they had gained was a double-edged sword. Success had opened doors, but it had also brought the weight of expectation and scrutiny. Despite the pressures, Ethan and Lila maintained their rhythm. They returned to the garage each evening, the space now more vibrant than ever, filled with sketches, prototypes, and new ideas. Lila's confidence grew with each day, her curiosity expanding into new realms of mechanics, energy systems, and design. Ethan watched her with awe, realizing that she had not only helped him achieve success, but had transformed their entire approach to problem-solving. Together, they were unstoppable, a fusion of experience and intuition, skill and imagination. One evening, after a long day of interviews and board meetings, Ethan and Lila sat quietly in the garage, examining a new component for the engine. Lila's brow furrowed in concentration as she adjusted a delicate valve, her fingers moving with precision and care. Ethan observed her silently, marveling at how much she had grown not just in skill, but in confidence, maturity, and courage. "Dad," she said softly, breaking the silence, "I want to keep building. I want to make more engines, more machines, things that help people." Her voice was filled with determination, and Ethan felt a lump in his throat. This was the spark that had always driven him, the desire to create, to innovate, to make a difference. And now, that spark was alive in Lila, burning brighter than he had ever imagined. "You will," he said firmly, placing a hand on her shoulder. "And I'll be right here with you, every step of the way." In that moment, Ethan realized that their journey had evolved. It was no longer just about the engine, the contest, or the recognition. It was about nurturing potential, fostering creativity, and empowering a young mind to reach heights that even he had never dreamed possible. The media attention continued to swell, but Ethan and Lila remained focused on their work. They knew that recognition was fleeting, that public praise could be as transient as applause, but the bond they had forged and the knowledge they had created together was enduring. Each prototype, each adjustment, each breakthrough was a testament not just to technical skill, but to trust, collaboration, and the power of shared vision. As the weeks passed, invitations to speak at schools and educational programs arrived. Lila's story inspired other young students, showing them that age was not a limitation, and that curiosity, persistence, and courage could overcome even the most daunting challenges. Ethan accompanied her to these events, guiding her gently, ensuring that the focus remained on learning and inspiration rather than fame. Together, they became role models, demonstrating that genius could emerge in unexpected ways, and that mentorship and love were as crucial to success as talent and knowledge. At night, back in their small Ohio home, Ethan often watched Lila sleep, exhausted from a day filled with interviews, presentations, and technical exploration. He reflected on how far they had come from the early days of struggle. Late nights in the garage, and the silent worry about their uncertain future, to recognition, innovation, and the discovery of their full potential. He felt a deep sense of gratitude, knowing that the journey had revealed not just a brilliant engineer, but a remarkable daughter whose heart and mind would shape the world. And as he drifted to sleep himself, he whispered softly, "We did this, Lila. But the best part? We've only just begun." Lila stirred slightly in her sleep, her small hand brushing against the prototype sketches beside her. The future awaited them, filled with endless possibilities, new inventions, and challenges that they would face together. The secret weapon had been revealed, the spark of genius recognized, and the bond between father and daughter stronger than ever. In the quiet of the night, the garage hummed softly with energy from a small test engine left running, a symbol of triumph, resilience, and the extraordinary partnership that had brought it to life. The journey ahead was still long, filled with new challenges, opportunities, and discoveries. But Ethan knew that with Lila by his side, there was nothing they could not achieve, no obstacle too great, and no dream too ambitious. Together, they were unstoppable, and the world was only beginning to realize it. The auditorium was packed, filled with people whose lives had been touched by innovation, curiosity, and the story of a father and daughter who had defied expectations. Students, educators, engineers, investors, and journalists all gathered for a special ceremony, recognizing the groundbreaking achievements of Ethan and Lila Cole. The story of the 9-year-old engineering prodigy and her father had become legendary, inspiring thousands, but tonight would be different. Tonight, the focus was on legacy, recognition, and the extraordinary bond that had made the impossible possible. Ethan stood behind the podium, scanning the room, his hands gripping the edges tightly. The low hum of excitement and anticipation echoed in the hall. He had spoken many times about the engine, about the technical brilliance of their collaboration, but this moment felt heavier, more profound. This was not just about recognition. It was about celebrating a journey, a partnership, and a bond forged in the fires of creativity, struggle, and trust. Lila sat beside him, her small legs swinging beneath the seat, a mixture of nervousness and excitement written across her face. She had grown tremendously since the first prototype, her confidence blossoming alongside her technical abilities. She understood now, in ways that a child often cannot, the depth of her contribution. And yet, she remained humble, eager, and full of wonder. Ethan took a deep breath. "Tonight," he began, his voice steady, yet filled with emotion, "we celebrate not just an invention, but a journey. A journey that began in a small garage in Ohio, with late nights, messy blueprints, and a determination to overcome obstacles that seemed insurmountable. And at the heart of that journey was someone extraordinary, my daughter, Lila. The audience erupted in applause, some standing, some cheering, all captivated by the story of genius nurtured with love and trust. Lila's eyes widened, a blush spreading across her cheeks as she waved shyly to the crowd. Ethan continued, "Her intuition, creativity, and courage have transformed not just this engine, but my life, and now, through our work, the lives of countless others. She is the reason this project succeeded. She is my secret weapon, and she is the heart of every innovation we create together." As he spoke, Ethan felt the weight of the past months, the doubt, the frustration. The long nights in the garage all crystallized into this single moment of recognition. And yet, this was more than just personal pride. It was about proving that brilliance can emerge anywhere, even in unexpected forms. Lila, a child with curiosity and courage, had altered the course of a company, inspired a nation, and reminded everyone in the room that age, experience, or title is not the only measure of genius. The ceremony continued with presentations of awards, certificates, and accolades, but the real magic happened when the engine was demonstrated once more. The prototype, sleek, efficient, and flawlessly engineered, roared to life in the auditorium, its hum resonating like a heartbeat. Lila's small hands adjusted a control, demonstrating the subtle improvements she had made, and the audience watched in awe. This was no longer a prototype. It was a symbol of possibility, innovation, and the incredible potential of collaboration across generations. After the demonstration, journalists flocked to Ethan and Lila, eager to hear their story, their process, and their plans for the future. Lila answered with a mixture of innocence and wisdom, explaining how her observations, adjustments, and creativity had helped perfect the engine. Ethan listened with pride, knowing that this was more than recognition. It was the validation of months of work, courage, and trust. She was no longer hidden behind his reputation. She stood as an equal, a genius in her own right. Later that evening, as the crowd dispersed and the hall emptied, Ethan and Lila walked outside, the cool night air carrying a sense of calm and triumph. The city lights twinkled below them, reflecting the endless possibilities that lay ahead. Ethan knelt beside his daughter, his hands on her shoulders. "Lila, do you know what you've done?" he asked softly. "You've shown the world that brilliance isn't measured by age or title. You've changed lives, inspired minds, and proved that courage and creativity can overcome any obstacle." Layla looked up at him, her eyes bright with curiosity and wonder. "I just wanted to help, Dad," she said quietly. Ethan smiled, feeling the depth of their shared journey in that simple sentence. "And you did more than help," he replied. "You led, you inspired, and you showed everyone what's possible when you trust yourself and those you love. You've created a legacy." The word legacy hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Ethan realized that the engine, the recognition, and even the fame were secondary. The true legacy was the partnership, the trust, and the courage that had brought them here. The world might remember the invention, the efficiency, and the accolades, but Ethan would always remember the quiet nights in the garage, the laughter, the mistakes, and the moments when a small hand had guided him to solutions he could never have found alone. In the following weeks, the story of Ethan and Lila spread far beyond their hometown. Educational programs invited them to speak about creativity, innovation, and the importance of nurturing young minds. Media outlets profiled Lila as a prodigy, but she always credited her father for his mentorship and trust. Together, they inspired thousands of children to tinker, explore, and dream. And in doing so, they reminded adults that genius is often collaborative, born of love, curiosity, and courage. Back in Ohio, the coal garage remained a sanctuary of creativity. The engine rested on its bench, but the sketches, tools, and scattered notes told the story of ongoing work, new ideas, and a partnership that would not be limited to one invention. Ethan and Lila continued to experiment, explore, and innovate, each success and setback reinforcing the bond that had grown stronger than either could have imagined. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Ethan watched Lila tinker with a small device, her eyes focused, her hands steady. He realized that this spark of ingenuity, determination, and courage was her true gift to the world. The engine had been a beginning, a symbol, a revelation. But Lila's brilliance was infinite, unbounded by expectations, and destined to shape the future in ways he could only imagine. He knelt beside her and whispered, "Whatever we build next, Lila, I know we can do it. Together." She looked up, her small face illuminated by the soft glow of the lamp, and smiled. "Yes, Dad, together." In that moment, Ethan understood the truth that had guided them all along. The secret weapon was never a blueprint, a machine, or even a clever adjustment. The secret weapon was Lila herself, her courage, her creativity, and her unwavering belief in herself and in him. And with that realization, he knew that no challenge, no obstacle, and no dream was beyond reach. As the night deepened, they sat side by side in the garage, the hum of small motors and faint scribbles of sketches surrounding them. The world outside could wait. For now, there was creation, discovery, and the unbreakable bond of a father and daughter who had proven that together, anything was possible. And in the quiet glow of their workshop, Ethan whispered once more, "You are extraordinary, Lila, and this is just the beginning." Lila nodded, eyes shining with excitement and determination, ready to face the future, ready to innovate, and ready to continue the story that had already inspired a nation. The secret weapon had been revealed, the legacy had begun, and the world would never look at invention or genius the same way again. And so, the father and daughter returned to their workbench, their laughter echoing softly in the garage, the engine humming steadily beside them. Their story had reached its first climax, but the journey of innovation, courage, and love would continue, brighter and more unstoppable than ever.